Triangle football in a nutshell. NC State, undefeated, visits Duke. Pat Welter, Mark Bergin here on WRAL Triangle and 2. Pat, I have this triangle football scene in a nutshell. The Wolfpack are undefeated, 3-0, going into Duke, yet the Blue Devils are a 3.5-point favorite. If that's not triangle football to a T, I don't know what is.
And I'm sure NC State fans are like, sounds about right, because they are waiting for another shoe to drop, because things have been going way too good right now for NC State. I mean, they escaped that ECU game, which got a little closer than you'd like. Then they had the trap game at Wake Forest, find themselves down 14-0 right off the bat, and they're like, here we go all over again. But so far, it's looked like a different kind of NC State team. Dave Doran puffing his chest a little bit, quoting Bull Durham after the win over Wake. They're feeling themselves, and the odds makers are like, not so fast, my friend.
I like the Lee Corso reference. Back-to-back weeks, cardiac pack, heart attack pack. I mean, back-to-back weeks of having to overcome double-digit deficits if you're NC State, and at what point that catches up with you. Now, State's going up against a Duke team that has beaten them in consecutive seasons. Duke was the best team in the state a year ago. So I think that the Wolfpack are going to want to get some retribution for that game last year. But I will say this, the skill position players for NC State offensively, CJ Bailey playing at a very high level, along with running back Hollywood Smothers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tale of two very different teams and two very different seasons so far. Everything seems to be clicking in general for NC State, and they're getting better with each game. I mean, we talked so much about the defense, specifically you did, how concerned you were against Virginia. Yeah, they get down 14-0 against Wake. One of that's on a kick return. The other is on, their quarterback, who was supposedly a running threat, throwing all over them, at least to start the game. But they adjust. They don't let up a single point in the second half. And that's kind of like 2 straight weeks now where they've played great defensively in the second half. And meanwhile, Duke just can't seem to get out of their own way. They're -6 in the turnover ratio department. I mean, this was a team that was, 6-1 in one-score games last year, and they are not even getting into those one-score games in a way because they keep shooting themselves in the foot. Some of it is the quarterback play, maybe Darian Mensah forcing the ball too much, but a lot of it's on special teams, little things. Connecting the snap on a field goal, muffing a punt in your own end. I mean, these are things you can't do if you want to win big games, and Duke has played well in the yardage department. They outgained Tulane. They outgained Illinois, and they lost both of those games pretty convincingly overall.
Yeah, with the Tulane loss, it's like, let's go pay the quarterback a ton of money to bring him to Durham, and they lose to the team that Darian Mensah was a member of a year ago. As far as how this shakes up with this triangle matchup that we have this week, NC State going to be without defensive end Sebastian Harsh for the first half of the game. He had that targeting call against Wake Forest. Late in the second half, the NCAA head of officials upholding that suspension, so they'll be without a key defender, at least for the first half in the game. And again, Pat, I think you bring up a good point, and it's like a Jekyll and Hyde when it comes to NC State's defense of first half, it gives up a ton of points, a ton of yardage. I don't know if it's adjustments made or if you just get more fired up. You'd like to see the Wolfpack defense play a complete game. Maybe we see that this weekend here in the Triangle at Wall Swade Stadium.
Yeah, they're going to need it because they're going to get a home run effort from Duke, because I think we both agree that Duke is better than what they've shown. And it's just tough to combat human nature, right? NC State is riding high. Like, there's no other way to say it. Everything is clicking. And, I mean, maybe that's a sign of a great team, right? If they're able to go in to Durham and send Duke to 1-3, I mean, that would be the sign to me that NC State's means serious business, that they might be an actual team that could get all the way to the ACC title game. But I have to think that Duke is going to be better than they've shown. If they could just stop beating themselves, they'd be in these games. They had a great backdoor cover-ish of sorts against Tulane. Like, they didn't actually backdoor cover, but they certainly made a run there to make Tulane think about it a little bit. But they could not stop Tulane's quarterback. You talk about the Darian Mensah transfer situation. They kind of luck into getting a real talent in Jake Retzlaff from BYU because of his off-the-field situation. He comes in there. He ran all over them. 4 rushing touchdowns. I'm watching that
for a quarterback. For a quarterback.
For a quarterback. 111 yards on the ground, not to mention pretty good in the passing game. I'm watching, I'm like, is Jake Retzlaff the number 1 pick in this year's draft? But it's hard to parse, right, where Tulane has a chance to be a playoff team as a group of 5 contender in the American Athletic Conference. Illinois has a chance to be a playoff caliber team coming out of the Big Ten. So it's kind of, how do you look at it? They just played a really hard schedule so far. Now, you could say NC State's battle-tested, having played ECU, which is a good American athletic team, having to play Wake and Virginia. But maybe it's Duke that's actually the team that's sneaky battle-tested and ready for this matchup. I'm not saying I'm not dying to pick either of these teams right now. This is a really, really tough one to call.
I can't believe that the Blue Devils are favored despite the 1-2 record. You talk about Duke getting out of its own way. Duke scored on 3 of its 5 red zone opportunities. You also had 2 false start penalties by an offensive line, pushes Duke back 10 yards. A kicker then misses a 44-yard field goal early in that Tulane game. So missing scoring opportunities when you need to come away with points, I think, is key. And then, putting your defense back on the field. I mean, other than, the ACC Defensive Player of the Week performance that we had from, was it VJ Anthony, who you interviewed, Pat, you desire more from the Blue Devils defense through 3 games this season.
Yeah, and VJ Anthony, shout out to him again. He's the one that comes up with the takeaway.
The one standout,
Yeah. And it's the only one they have on the season. I mean, that's you can't expect to win that way, right? That's the only, and their mind and their offense is giving it away, and so is the special teams. So that's the key to the game, certainly. But NC State's gonna pressure you because they have a run game and they have a pass game and they have a quarterback that's taking care of the ball. And that's just the offensive side. And I think the defense is getting better. Sebastian Harsh not being available is going to hurt because he's been arguably their best defensive player. They haven't had a ton as far as pass rush, and he's been one of the guys that has delivered it, him and Kean Sloan. So I think that's going to have an impact here. But, man, NC State just looks really good to me. And if they are really going to have a special season, they had to beat Virginia. They had to beat Wake on the road. These are games that maybe an NC State Dave Doran team would lose in the past. And they're going to have to beat Duke. If they want to get over that 8-9 win hump, get to double-digit wins, get to an ACC title game, we've talked about the remaining schedule. It gets really tough from here after Virginia Tech, Campbell, Notre Dame, who's not in the top 25 currently, has a good chance to get back in there again. One of the best 0-2 teams you're ever going to see. Pitt, number 18 Georgia Tech, who just beat Clemson. Number 4 Miami. Number 7 Florida State. And a UNC team that's starting to improve, and who knows what they're going to look like at the end of the year.
We'll get to the Tar Heels in just a second. Look for Chase Bond to fill in for Sebastian Harsh in the first half, at least if you're looking at the Wolfpack depth chart of who fills that void in the first half against Duke. Any other thoughts about Duke NC State before we go to the Tar Heels?
Just Dave Doran, like in his wheelhouse, quoting Bull Durham. I've always thought he looked a little bit like Kevin Costner. Got Bill Belichick on my mind. Did you see that? Do you see he looks kind of like Kevin Costner?
I see it.
I've always wanted to say that to him. I don't know if he would appreciate it or not. I mean, I think it's a compliment. But he's living in his own sports movie right now. This was a guy that we did a podcast on. I came on here and I said I thought he was on the hot seat entering the season. And I think that was a fair statement. Just given the climate, given the kind of way NC State football has kind of stalled out 13 years in, and here they are looking like maybe they could take another step.
Here we are yet again where there's no expectations going in, and the Wolfpack overperform those expectations. Then when there are expectations, they don't live up to said expectations.
So I guess in that way, it is just history repeating. This is nothing new for
Time
NC
is
State.
a flat circle, Pat Welter. But if you want to get to double-digit wins, this is a game that you got to have. And Dave Doran in year 13, that's something he has not accomplished. He's gotten to 9 wins on 4 different seasons. But if you want to get to those double digits, if you want to get to 10, this is one that you have to win against a 1-2 Duke team on the road.
No, I'm with you.
I'm going to say this. My final thought about this game would be like, I'm curious to see what the split is among the fans that are there, of how many Duke fans show up to Wallace Wade Stadium and then how many NC State fans, because it's not that far apart, Raleigh to Durham. So I'm curious to see what that split is when you're talking about the crowd that's there on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, Diaz, talking about the loss to Tulane, said it was short-term negative feedback. He's got all these cool quotes. The week before was the architect of our own demise.
Well, that and then having the answers to the test, but then you get tested on other things that necessarily aren't on the study guide. Yeah, I've noticed this with Manny Diaz during his media availabilities.
He's got his board of quotes. He's coached under a lot of good coaches, so I imagine he picks them up along the way. He also wanted to be in media at one time, so he's got a little bit of a writer in him. But I thought that was an interesting way to frame it, and he looked at it like, hey, if we're going to be to take a step as a big program as Duke, we have to be able to weather the storm in these kind of moments and not let short-term negative feedback, as in these two tough losses, set them back on where they want to get to. So they're going all in on this game, but I just think NC State's better right now.
I do too. I think this is going to be a kitchen sink game for Duke. Manny Diaz was saying that he thought that Tulane threw out the kitchen sink against the Blue Devils. I expect Duke to do the same against NC State as they try to get back on track and to avoid what would be a 3-game losing streak if they fall short. Let's go to UNC at UCF. This game's going to be on Fox, so you can see it here locally. 3:30, but game in Orlando. UNC 1-2 straight now going into this game, so kind of right where you expected the Tar Heels to be going into the season. One final tune-up for the Tar Heels. I hate to say it's a tune-up because UNC is an underdog going into this game, Pat.
Right.
But before conference play starts, before you go after big, bad, mighty Clemson, even though Clemson's got 2 losses already this season, the writing is set. The writing is set as you go on the road and you try to win in the bounce house in Orlando.
And they've come a long way for this moment. We were worried after that TCU game where the heck they'd be at this point. Anything seemed on the table. That Charlotte and Richmond games that you had easily slotted in as wins were questionable at the time.
The Charlotte game, the Richmond, I thought they looked good. Not demon, but our guy Damon June, a demon for opposing defenses, if you will, Pat. Yeah. 148 yards on the ground and a touchdown, so finally getting into rhythm. We talk about quarterbacks getting into rhythm a lot of the times, Pat. I'm also thinking about what that happens when you get a running back in rhythm with the offensive line, where you establish that, then you can set up things like the play action. So getting someone with the hot hand on the ground for the Tar Heels, if they want to continue to have success, ride that hot hand, give June the football.
Yeah, this is an awesome story. Damon June, he's out of Jacksonville, North Carolina, going to the state of Florida. Nice little parallel there. And he's a find. This was a true freshman that was kind of buried on the depth chart among guys that had been on this team for a long time, and Davion Goss and Charleston French and Caleb Hood out there. But Belichick talked about it. He's like, well, Damon just kind of worked his way up the depth chart, showed a little bit in practice, showed a little bit on special teams, and you see him in the game. You're like, how did it take this long to get him out there? Because he is so far and above the best player on UNC right now, right? Like,
so
that's what it looks like to me.
It pops off the screen. You don't even need two eyeballs. You just need one eye, Pat Welter. But yeah, to where your eyes don't lie. Your eyes don't lie. So when you know it, you see it. I just think you force a defense to say stop him. Then that sets up everyone else. It sets up Gio Lopez in the passing game where he's still trying to get acclimated. He's still trying to find himself to help guide this offense. When you have a sound running game, it doesn't just help you offensively. It helps keep your defense off the field too. You talk to any defensive player who's ever played any football at a high level, Pat, and you say, what's it like having an effective running game to where you can just chill on the sidelines, you can just relax, and to where you're not stuck on the field play after play after play after play. That attrition over long periods of time, specifically as you get later into the season, where all of the wear and tear adds up over time, being able to control the clock, being able to control time of possession, being able to control the point of attack at the line of scrimmage, it's so, so, so important. And I don't think it's talked nearly enough about where we always want to focus on the quarterbacks, but the running game, I think, is what is going to be key for this Tar Heels offense. And it's not just how Bill Belichick wants to play football. I've talked to you about this, Pat, what Freddie Kitchens wants to do as an offensive coordinator, what his coaching lineage is. Before he came to UNC, it was as a running backs coach, it was as an offensive coordinator, and it was establishing the run to set everything else up.
And I think what we just saw is how they want to play, ideally. Now, yeah, it was against FCS Richmond, so I'm struggling a little bit with how much do I draw from this 41-6 win. But all you can draw is what you saw. And what you saw is what you needed to see. I'm kind of making my own Manny Diaz turn of phrase here as I go. But you saw them dominate both lines of scrimmage for the first time this season. Yes, was it an inferior opponent? Absolutely. But we hadn't seen them dominate versus Charlotte. They kind of inked out that game a little bit. But against Richmond, it was another story. I mean, here's a stat for you. First time since 2012, UNC has kept consecutive opponents from scoring touchdowns. That's good.
That was the big difference with, why Mac Brown is gone. And after that TCU game, we're all saying we got rid of Mac Brown for this.
Yeah.
It was the 70 points to James Madison, the embarrassment against Boston College. It's, a 70 piece against James Madison. So it's like when you bring Bill Belichick in, looking past the opener against TCU, a team that was favored over the Tar Heels going into that game. You didn't expect to lose in that manner, but it's like defensively a Bill Belichick coach team is going to be more sound. This is a good test before going into Clemson. This is a really good test. UCF is a respectable program. They have a home field advantage of sorts. I've been to the Bounce House. I was there in 2018. It's really weird walking into that stadium where they have home of the 2017 national champions. And for people listening to this, I'm putting that in massive air quotes.
Right.
But the people, the UCF fans, take pride in that when they ran the table in 2017 and had an undefeated record. Now, this is before the college football playoff and everything expanded, but they'll have a bit of a home field advantage. I expect a raucous atmosphere. But for UNC, for the Tar Heels, this is a game where, again, you've got to get right before you go into conference play when things really ramp up here. And, this is the next test ahead for them. But, to me, this is your biggest test that you've seen really since that opener against TCU.
And Belichick gave UCF and their underrated fan base a little bit of bulletin board material after the Richmond game. I don't know if you saw this, but Belichick, talking about UCF, referred to them as Central. Now, yes, they are University of Central Florida, but to educate some of the non-indoctrinated around here in the Triangle, I worked in Orlando. I covered UCF down there for a few years. They like to go by UCF. They made a concerted marketing effort to not even be the University of Central Florida, just strictly UCF. It's part of their branding, part of their mission. The fans have embraced it. So anytime any announcer comes on and refers to them as even Central Florida, they kind of get triggered and go off on social media. So I put this quote out from Belichick. It's close to 200,000 views.
Oh, man.
They call themselves the UCF Twitter Mafia. They took this thing and ran with it.
I tell you what, because I worked down in Florida for 5 years as well too, Pat, and they have the largest in terms of undergraduate student population of any university in Florida, which is crazy. I think it's something like 50 or 60,000 undergraduate students that go to that school.
Yeah,
so there is a lot of pride. There is a lot of pride there, but if you're the Tar Heels, this has to be like for me, this is a huge litmus test because then it's just like, all right, the following week, regardless of how Clemson's played to this point in this season, just the caliber of recruits Clemson has versus North Carolina. I'm not trying to look past this game, but how you can actually stack up against the better competition. And we know that's coming a week from now against Clemson. So it's like the Clemson game might look a lot like the TCU game in the opener. So this is one that if you're North Carolina, if you want to go to a bowl game, if you want to get to where you want to go with Bill Belichick, it's one that you've got to have, even despite the fact that UCF is favored by 6.5 going into this one.
I think it's a big moment for Gio Lopez, who struggled in the opener, got hurt, had to leave that game, comes back versus Charlotte. Offense doesn't do a lot, short of his incredible opening throw deep to start the game to Chris Culliver. And versus Richmond, I thought he was solid. They were running the ball. He wasn't asked to do a ton. Season on the season, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Run game element hasn't really been there. But maybe now that Damon June's rolling, maybe they can get that going, get more play action, get things working for him. They're clearly invested in him, quite literally, financially, with the NIL dollars and giving him a leash here to start the year, even though Max Johnson probably wasn't that far behind him in camp and looked pretty good in the opener. So I think this is a big moment for him. It's a big moment for the entire team to kind of see where they're at. To your point, use the word litmus test, because this is a test. Because this is a big game for UCF, too. Like, we always look through things through our lens.
2-0 going into this game.
Now, they haven't really played anybody, but they're coming off a bye. They've got a new coach, too, in Scott Frost, who knows what it's like to go be the savior and have all the pomp and circumstance and all the hype. He was at UCF that year that they claimed the national championship.
And he's back.
He goes to his alma mater, Nebraska, and they just fall completely on their face. It's an abject disaster. And now he's back at UCF, who lost Gus Malzahn to a coordinator job at Florida State, even though he's probably on his way out regardless. So this is a big game for them, too, and they're coming off a bye. So you don't think they want to beat North, the great North versus Central game and Bill Belichick? You got another thing coming.
I wonder if they bring that up in the broadcast at all in advance of the game. But
I wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's an interesting note. It's something. That's what makes college football so great. That even a school like UCF, that outside of the South and Florida, even people aren't super familiar with, but is this school that produced Josh Heupel, who's now the head coach at Tennessee, had that incredible magical season in 2017 where they beat, the reason they claimed a national title is because they beat Alabama and Georgia, both the teams that played for the title, they beat Auburn, who beat both of those teams. UCF ends up as the only undefeated. So they had an actual claim. There's something called the Cauley Matrix, which everybody in Orlando loves to point to. Back in the day when we just gave national champions by all these weird different polls that go beyond the AP poll. The Cauley Matrix still had been number one.
They claim a national title. I tell you what, Pat, you walk into that stadium and it's like, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone being there. I'm like, does everyone else believe this? Am I in a fever dream right now?
Right.
But, for fitting about 40,000 fans into their stadium, they do create a home field advantage. Now, is it something that you'd see in the big-time ACC or the big-time SEC or Big Ten schools? No. But it's a respectable program. And I mean, you mentioned some of the coaches. Dylan Gabriel was there before he transferred to Oklahoma and then went on to Oregon. So there's been some talented players, and they have
R.J. Harvey.
Yes, they do have a winning culture. And so, again, if you're UNC, like, if this is a game where you get smoked in, and then you start conference play, then we're saying, we have all these questions. You mentioned Gio Lopez too, Pat. How he's rebounded, I thought it's been solid in these last 2 games because after that opener, we're like, does Max Johnson have a case to be the starting quarterback? And now you mentioned the financial commitment that the Tar Heels made to him. It's his show, and so he's got to steer the ship for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, and I thought he looked better, and I think some of the running game opened things up over the middle, which is where you see Jordan Shipp really shine.
Yep.
Chris Culliver avoids what looked like could be a serious injury when he went down against Charlotte. So all good things there. And Damon June is just an absolute revelation. One of our biggest question marks through 2 weeks was how talented is this UNC team? They aren't dominating either line of scrimmage. No skill players are really popping. But Damon June popped against Charlotte, and then they had at least the wherewithal to give this guy the ball against Richmond, and he goes off for 148 yards and a score and looks like some sort of hybrid between Derrick Henry and Kareem Hunt out there. I mean, he looks like he could play in the NFL right now, which is the same thing I thought about Omarion Hampton when he was a true freshman, just physically, his body. And I love it when he comes to the press conference. He's got the glasses, too. He looks like a really put-together guy ready to go out there and be in the pros. It's just an incredible find. So it's nice to see some talent emerge. And you saw the same thing defensively. They forced 3 turnovers. They had the fumble return for the score. I thought they could have put even more points on the board, but I think you have to say that as far as what you were hoping to get out of the Richmond game, you got. And yeah, they're a 6.5-point dog at UCF. I still think you hope that they win this game. right? Like
For
they
UNC,
need to.
yeah.
Would you go as far to say they need to win this game for this? Like, I mean, if you're talking about this season needs to be a success, if they can't go in,
Look at the
to
schedule.
beat UCF,
because then you go on the road, really late night game against Cal on the 17th. You've got Virginia, and then a Halloween game against Syracuse. So it doesn't. That's
not a
their
lot
October.
of wins out there. They need this.
They need it if you want to at least go to a bowl game. You got to get to 6 wins for that. So, yeah, you've got to get there one way or another, because a week from now against Clemson, like what that spread's going to be, Pat, because UNC is going to be the underdog regardless of what Clemson does this weekend for its matchup.
And Clemson can't take anybody lightly after going into Georgia Tech and losing down there.
If Clemson wants any chance at backdooring, the Tigers backdooring their way into the CFP, they have to run the table.
Yeah, so UNC will at least have a bye going into that one. I believe I have that correct, that they have a bye before Clemson.
Correct.
So that'll give them some time to lick their wounds and figure out who they are. But, Belichick, to his credit, everyone in the media, everyone in the fan bases panicked, and in some ways rightly so, after the TCU loss. But Belichick, steady. They went back. They've gotten a little bit better each week. They clearly haven't lost the team. I think we were asking questions about the staff. We're asking questions about the talent. And I think to a certain extent here, through the Charlotte and the Richmond games, even if they were just kind of business-like performances, at least kind of revived some confidence in what's happening in Chapel Hill.
For UNC's sake, it's good that this game comes earlier in the year versus later in the year, and you go down to Orlando and it's really warm out and you're used to playing in the cold, maybe in the snow in certain areas, where early on in the season where it's still really nice weather, warm even, that change in climate's not a huge difference versus, you see this all the time in the NFL where you'll go down to Jacksonville or Miami, and even if the teams aren't very good, that change of climate's just so different than what you've been accustomed to in this point.
Yeah.
I think it's to the Tar Heels' benefit this game's in September versus, say, if you had not a conference matchup randomly on the schedule later on in the season.
Well, that's where Boston College got them last year. I know that's not an out-of-conference game, but they went up there to the cold and they just weren't having it. You saw right off the bat in that game how uncomfortable Mac Brown looked on the sidelines. I think he changed his coat, outfit, hat combo a few different times on the sidelines because it's uncomfortable when you're used to playing down here in North Carolina where it's picture-perfect fall weather. Going to some different climates can be a challenge. And, yeah, talking about going to Orlando in September, the humidity down there is different, very different. So that will be a factor in the game. Talk about, getting into the fourth quarter, different things like that, cramping, all of those issues could potentially present themselves.
Before we wrap here, where will you be Saturday?
Yeah, I would love to say I'm going on the road to see some old buddies down in Orlando, but I will be at Duke NC State. So we're going to be all in on that game locally and then watching UNC UCF from afar.
Okay. He's the one and only Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergin. You always have something hilarious to sign off, Pat, but I always enjoy chopping it up with you. But you always have a legendary sign off, and hopefully we get some more late night stories of when you're getting back late from the game. Make sure that you eat some food. Make sure you get your grub, Pat.
Well, I'm making it. Can we get this sponsored? Because I went to Waffle House again.
Okay. The sequel.
And this time I went in there real confident. I knew exactly the layout. It was a different Waffle House. I didn't even know where I was. I go to the waitress.
This was for the State Wake Forest game?
This was that one. Where did I go? I went to Sheetz for that one.
Okay.
This was a Friday night after high school football coverage.
Okay, I got you.
And that's a whole other story, probably a whole other podcast. What went on then? But as far as the funny way to end the what was Waffle House? They're my people. I go in there, I sit at the bar, they treat me right, they get me a biscuit, egg, and cheese with bacon, promptly and quickly wrap it in foil, and I'm back on the road and have a little story to tell. I might stick around next time, Mark.
We got to get you the Pat Welter, where whatever dish that is of your choosing, where, we will have that right away for you, of serving up all the fixins.
Yeah, serving up I keep it simple. I like bacon, egg, and cheese on a biscuit. Or when I go to Sheetz, I get it on a waffle. You can get it on a waffle bread, and that just hits at 2 a.m. You get a little sweet. You get the salty from the American cheese and the bacon. That one's a little processed, from their situation. Credit to Waffle House. They make the eggs fresh, but man, nothing hits better at that hour, at least for me. Some guys like pizza, French fries. I just like a good old egg sandwich.
It's a sign we got to go because I'm about to go into a food coma just thinking about this. He is the one and only Pat Welter. Check out his coverage from Duke, NC State on Saturday. I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening and watching to another edition of WRAL Triangle and 2.